books.
Welcome back to Unlocking Great Books, and we're into season 5, because I just like saying that because it sounds like a long time. But today, we've got a great book.
I love this
Calling
book so
Bullshit.
much. Yeah. So we should say he's Sean, I'm Carl. Welcome back.
Yes.
Welcome back to the
We're
pod.
broadcasting professionals. This whole new start is throwing me. But,
I know, I'm sorry.
Unlocking Great Books,
Yeah.
Carl and Sean. He's Carl, and I'm Sean.
So go on, give us the subtitle.
Well, it's The Art of Skepticism in a Data-Driven World,
Yeah.
By Carl T. Bergstrom and Jevin D. West.
Yeah, I think this is a really important book. I'm really glad we got to do
Yes, and this is, I think I mentioned it in the episode, this is one that Carl has mentioned numerous times. So,
okay.
So, no, this is good. This is our democratic way of picking books as well. I love it. So,
as you'll see as we cover in this episode, this is a field guide to critical thinking.
Yeah.
I think it's the best introduction to critical thinking there is.
yes,
which is saying
and
something.
highly readable.
Yeah. And so when we talk about this in this episode, we're going to talk about critical thinking and epistemology and your brain and cognitive biases.
Yeah.
You're going to talk about Walter Mischel and the bloody marshmallow experiment.
Well, just a quick reference, and we're going to say the word bullshit a few times.
Yes,
so
good point. Yeah,
so if that's triggering you right now, I'd suggest.
Yeah, but we'll explain why we have to say it a few times.
Yeah.
And actually, we're not. Even though
we're not just cussing.
we're not just being potty
It's not
mouthed.
mindless
Although it's
cuss.
fun, right?
It's not. Yeah.
And the great news about this episode is it's not bullshit.
So let's get into it.
Books. I need my books.
It's podcast time.
You love that.
Oh, I do love that line.
So, Calling Bullshit, the art of skepticism in a data-driven world.
Yeah.
What do we know about the authors?
Well, these are a couple academics, and I have to say they've got a course called
that's what the
Calling.
book's-
This is
That's what the book's based
the
on.
book is based
on
on
the
a
course.
university course. Now, can you imagine rocking up to the University of Washington, I believe, and going, what papers should I do this year?
Yeah.
Oh, calling bullshit.
Yeah, but that's true, right?
Yeah.
But I think everybody should do a course on critical
100%,
thinking, right?
100%.
I mean, that's just...
But what a great, and they do talk about their lectures being overflowing and all that kind of stuff. So you can imagine, which I maybe hits on that point you just made.
Yeah.
Good for everyone,
Yeah.
isn't it? So,
Well, I mean, look, in many regards, the book we're going to talk about is their course, right?
Yes.
And it's structured like the course, which is its strength and its weakness. But they're really interesting guys because they're not necessarily the guys you would expect. I would have expected social scientists.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And we're talking about,
yeah.
how do you consume
Because what are their
information?
backgrounds?
Well, one is a biologist and one is a computer modeler. Right?
Well, to be fair, you can pick up on a scientific background for this topic. So,
so Bergstrom's work focuses on the flow of information through biological networks.
okay, right. Well, there you go. Yeah.
But I tell you, he's interesting. So they're both at University of Washington, Washington State. But Bergstrom's undergraduate's Harvard and his graduate's Stanford.
Right. Okay. So he's
academic
big,
royalty,
big,
right?
big dog. Yeah.
But when you say that, people
no.
listening in the real world, they're going, "Well, it's going to make this book
But
unintelligible." Right? No, it's
not
not
at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Yeah.
You've talked about this book a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like you've mentioned this book several times, and,
Well, it's
I'm glad we're here.
Yeah. So you know
talking
that
about it.
we teach critical thinking, right? Working with the Marketing Association, we created the Critical Thinking Fight Club course.
Yes,
Love
which
that.
I like.
Yeah, it's one of the things I'm most proud of. At the end of the long day version of that, people often say is the one thing I can read. And in the absence of having written our own book, we just say,
100%.
yeah, go and read Calling
Like, do
Bullshit.
you actually need to write another book? Because
Yeah, that's right.
this is great. So, where to start? Like,
Where to start?
Let's start at the top.
Yeah.
So, if I was to try and describe this, and I wrote this down straight off the cuff this morning, I think this is statistics meets human behavior, and I think it picks up. Like I studied statistics. I used to hate statistics,
Right.
but when I first was exposed to it,
Yeah.
I hope my daughter doesn't hear this because she may like it, but I knew I needed it, but the relevance of it was never quite there.
No, but the reason for that,
Mm.
right? I know I teach statistics. The reason for that is you would have learned how to do statistics.
Yes, but you didn't know why.
Yeah, and the course you need is how to read statistics.
Yeah.
So there's that brilliant
And that's
book.
why I love this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I think I love this book.
Well, there's that brilliant book called How to Lie with Statistics by Daryl Huff, right?
Yes.
Tiny little book from the 50s.
Yeah.
It's not really about how to lie with statistics. It's about how to know if you're being lied to with statistics, which these guys cover in a chapter brilliantly, right?
Yeah, yeah. But the point is, there's a bigger world here, and this bumps into the human behavior thing as well. So, so when, like, and I'm trying to remember, did they have a definition of bullshit? They did.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So let's start there, right?
Because we're going to say, just in case you haven't, we're going to say bullshit a lot.
Yeah, sorry.
So
we've got no choice.
If you're offended by that, turn it off.
But here's the reason why that matters, right?
Yes.
So, for reasons that we don't need to go into, over the last 10 or 15 years, academics have got really interested in the notion of bullshit.
Yes.
And the argument is bullshit isn't lies. If somebody lies to you, they know the truth and they want to hide it from you. They care deeply about the truth. Someone's bullshitting you, they don't care about the truth, they just want to change your mind.
Yes.
So they just throw all sorts of anything at you.
Yeah.
Now, there's a great, 5 minutes in and I'm telling about another book. There's a brilliant little book called On Bullshit by Harry Frankfurt.
Oh, yes, I think I read that.
Yeah, it's brilliant, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of thing. So bullshit exists as this thing between...
And that's that's referring right back to the old days.
In fact, these guys make a brilliant distinction between misinformation and disinformation,
yes.
right? So one is when the information is wrong, but they're not trying to manipulate you.
Yeah, it's just wrong.
That's wrong. That's misinformation. Disinformation is when they're lying to you directly to try and influence you.
Yes.
Right. And the point is, we've gone from a world of misinformation. I mean, obviously the world's always been like this, but the internet's magnified the rise of disinformation.
Yeah, 100%. And we did talk about that in our first episode as well. That I mentioned the volume of material now, and the fact that with that comes the fact that specialist things become more diffused out into the world, don't they? So an area like statistics, for example, becomes mainstreamed and people perceive it as science, but it's not really science because we're not sure who actually came up with
so we're going to bounce all over the place, but
they
they talk about black boxes in the book, don't they?
Yeah.
Which is a statistical model, right?
Yes.
You stick some input in, you get some input out,
Everyone talks about the metaphorical black box, don't we? Yeah. But I mean, in some respects, and this is, it's quite good to build upon, this is why we thought it was a great companion to week one, is because when we're talking about the filter bubble and the internet and the algorithms and all that kind of stuff, they're effectively black boxes to us.
Yes.
And that's when we, you talked about the spidey sense, like the whole, hang on.
Yeah.
We should, when it's that easy, we should be going, there's something to be asked here. There's something else we need to know, challenge ourselves, all that kind of stuff.
So one of the things we say in our critical thinking course is irritation is your friend. If you feel yourself getting irritated when you're talking to somebody or you're reading something, ask yourself why, right?
Why? Yeah. And we should come back to the tips and tricks because I thought that was really good. But there is so much packed into this book, but they package it up really nicely, don't they? Through the different chapters and all that kind of stuff. So do we want to rattle through some of the... what's your favourite chapter, I guess? What I give as a handout is I give the 28 tips. Yes.
Right. So I actually give that as a handout.
But I think, should we hold the tips to
we absolutely we will. So when this came out, the one that everybody loved was the chapter on big data. Again, I think that's kind of aged and is, as you said in the previous episode, AI is kind of...
But I guess we've covered that, isn't it? And so this, the idea of big data, and I guess, like diving into that a little bit more than maybe we did last time. We're talking about AI now as the new thing, and I think people are now starting to come to the conclusion. Well,
interestingly, these guys run a course. Their new course is AI and bullshit.
Ah, brilliant. Okay, so very timely.
Yeah. So
but again, it's another wave of technology. We talked about technology not being good, bad, but it is not neutral. It's how you use it, and I think AI is another one of those ones where the debate at the moment is, what is it helpful to us for?
Yeah.
And also that you just can't completely outsource something to AI and then get it back and then go, oh, gee, I didn't realize it was going to say that, so this is that whole, how did it learn? What's it trained on? The algorithms, all that kind of stuff. And they talk about overfitting, don't they? So
overfitting data is a great one. But a really simple critical thinking approach is when somebody presents a claim to you, you've got to ask, where did it come from originally?
Yes.
And what does the claim really say?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, look, what do I like? I like everything. I mean, the causality question works.
Oh, yeah. I wanted
Correlation
to
and
ask you about that.
Yeah,
Now,
okay.
so there's the infamous marshmallow
Yes.
thing, isn't
Yes.
there? And I thought that was actually a really great example that they brought up.
Yeah.
So the idea, there's that infamous marshmallow experiment where, marshmallows were put in front of kids, and if you waited long enough, you got both of them and all that kind of stuff. And they talked about the link between delayed gratification and higher scores in life success. And this is a really great example of causality.
Correlation being causality.
And correlation.
Yeah. Well, it's even worse than that, though, isn't it? Because they talk about selection bias.
Yes.
And, again, if you trace the claim, dissect the claim, then you've got to contextualize the claim. And one of the things we know is so much of the academic research that we lean on for marketing and policy and science is done with white, educated American college kids.
Yeah.
It's actually called the SUCS, S-U-C-S, the Standard Undergraduate Cohort Study or something like that.
Oh, true.
It's actually a thing, right?
True. Yeah, well, it makes sense, doesn't it?
And some people think that's why psychology is having trouble replicating so much research.
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
Yeah,
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So selection bias is a problem. Like, you can only talk about the people that you've got in the study. And this is why, massive online surveys are so problematic. Huge selection bias, you're getting them from the same place.
Yeah, so that is where the results are influenced by the act of sampling and not thinking about the act of sampling, who's in the sample, how did you pick the sample. They use a really great example it's this right censoring thing, which is where you pick people who are predicated to be picked. It's kind of like, and...
this is a problem.
The corporate wellbeing program. I found that fascinating.
But think about how this is a problem, right? The participation is voluntary, then the only people who participate are the people who are motivated to participate.
Yes.
So
take that back to the corporate wellbeing example. The people who participate in corporate wellbeing programs are the people who participate because they're going to benefit from it and are motivated to benefit from them.
So do corporate wellbeing programs work? For whom? What does that mean? Yeah.
The data, the data is quite messy or not convincing, isn't it? So, so it's fascinating.
So I mean, how to spot a bad statistic, media message misinformation. Causality, I absolutely love. Numbers and nonsense. Look, it's just.
I've got a few.
Okay, go on. Tell me what really stuck out for you.
Well, I love the fact that they talk about numbers being bullshit targets. That's a whole chapter on numbers. And when you think about it, this is that whole median, mean, we get hit with the median wage, this, the that, and I always think of the classic political line, the tax cuts have delivered $20 a week to who? At what level? And there's so much more behind the numbers, but the numbers give the impression.
That's the point. They give false precision, right?
Yes.
If you say if you use any of the subjective...
If you use any numbers,
if you
people's brains.
Words feel slippery.
Yes.
But numbers give you precision, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that
or the
we're all
perception
taught and they talk
precision.
about is be really cautious of super precise statistics.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because that's not going to work. So I have to say this. I only was reminded of this reading the book again. There's a brilliant book that came out in the 90s by a woman called Cynthia Crossan called Tainted Truth, which basically does everything this book does, but did it 30 years earlier.
Right.
That book changed my life.
Okay,
Really,
interesting.
About media, PR. We use that in my old company, No Doubt Research, is the thing we used to give out to our clients. It's been out of print forever.
Right. So we have to dig that one out somewhere. Maybe Rotary Books.
Oh, I've got it.
You've got it. Of course you've got it.
I'll have a couple copies of it. And it may seem incredibly dated now. But same deal, right?
Yeah.
Same deal about...
But how do we... this is really interesting, isn't it? Because... we're sitting here, we've both been educated. You've taught statistics. I've done enough statistics to get my head around it. That takes, there's quite a bit that goes into that to understand what these things mean. Yeah. Who's at fault here when we grab these numbers? Someone's done some numbers. Yeah. like
Go-
they're factually
Go
correct.
back to episode 1, right?
Yeah.
Like, who wants to influence us?
Yes, that's right.
You know,
So again, it's and that's the point, isn't it?
And
Why are we seeing this number?
yeah. So, people want
Yeah.
to influence us as citizens, and they want to influence us as consumers.
Yes.
Right? So those are the people that are doing this.
Yeah. That's a good
And
point.
also, your mates down the pub are doing this, where they're just pulling out cherry-picking statistics to support an argument, some bullshit number,
And we've talked about the spread of bullshit. So these numbers get spread around.
So Brandolini's law, right?
Yes, now I love this.
So Brandolini's law, right? The amount of energy you need to refute bullshit is exponentially greater than you need to start and spread.
Now, I love the fact that you just quoted that off the top of your head, because I think that is a really fundamental truth.
Yeah.
So let's unpack that, because I think that's a good
Yeah.
concept for people to get their head around.
Well, hold on. So
So-
Mark Twain said the same thing hundreds of years ago. He said, a lie has gone halfway around the world before the truth has even put its boots on.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah.
like...
And you think about him saying it at that time.
Yeah. But it
Yeah.
goes back to process
Yeah, wow.
influency. You
Yeah.
say something that people believe that fits their worldview.
Yeah, confirmation
right?
bias.
Confirmation
yeah.
bias, processing fluency. I
Yeah.
like it. It works. I'll spread it really quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas if I have to say
And it's
to you,
memorable.
that's not true. So the example they talk about in the book is the MMR vaccine.
Oh,
right?
100%.
Right, that's a
Yes.
great one.
Yeah.
One paper, it lined up with a whole lot of conspiracy
And do you know
theorists.
what? Yeah, it's fascinating. So we're talking about the anti-vax, kind of the vaccines lead to autism study. I didn't realize 12 kids were involved in that study.
Yeah. So
And the guy got completely done for fraud.
they've retracted the paper.
Yep. They did everything
Yep.
possible. They've repeated the studies hundreds of
Nature
times.
have talked any number of
It got
times.
ripped.
but
It
exactly.
got ripped to shreds.
Yeah,
And we still hear it.
exactly.
Yeah,
Because
amazing.
Because it's really easy, right?
Yes.
It's easy. It's memorable, and it confirms what people already think.
Yeah. So
So
that's a
don't
good
forget,
point.
your brain processes confirming information twice as fast as disconfirming information. This is why the golden rule of bloody science is: how do you prove the idea wrong, not how do you prove the idea right? When we teach critical thinking, I think Popper's work on falsification is the most powerful tool.
Right. Okay.
Right, which is in science, you never get to prove your ideas right.
Yeah, that's true.
You can only prove them wrong.
That's true.
Which means what you need to
Which
be
is the
thinking all
hypothesis
time,
thing, isn't it?
exactly,
Yes,
which is
yes.
how do I prove this idea wrong?
Yeah.
Not how do I confirm that I'm right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So the and it's the persistence of these ideas. And I was just gonna pick up on that. Let's compare that vaccine study versus say no one ever landed on the moon.
Yeah.
Is the fact that something like that is more persistent because of what they're talking about here is the perception of credibility.
Yeah.
That it's a study and it's this and it's that.
Well, it's
and
based on-
then there's
but
the
it's
alignment
based
of
on-
thinking.
So there's a bunch of things, right?
Yeah.
So the first of all is the filter bubble stuff we talked
Yeah.
about last
Yeah.
episode. Then there's just profound ignorance.
Mm.
Like people saying, think about how hard it must be,
Yeah.
to survive beyond what's the radiation belt?
Yeah.
Beyond that. Somebody's screaming.
But we've got so
screaming
many
at the phone.
counterfactuals to say that no one went on the moon
Yeah.
versus this available to us,
Yeah.
haven't we? So we see things that are a lot easier to
Yeah,
make sense
but-
of,
but-
therefore we can come to a different conclusion. Is
But
that
people believe a lot of dumb things?
Oh, yeah,
Even
yeah.
smart people believe dumb things. You and
Yeah.
I believe a lot of dumb things,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
There are things
100%.
we believe now than 20 years from now we'll be horrified that we know. But that's why that idea of if you're thinking like a scientist, all of your ideas are hypotheses
Yes.
to be tested,
Yeah.
not treasures to be defended.
Yeah, that's good.
Right?
That's really good.
Yeah, and what happens if you really believe they didn't land a man on the moon? Then you just want to defend that position, right? You're always in defensive mode. Somebody once said, again, this isn't a political podcast.
No, but we see it in politics
Yeah.
all the time.
But
Yeah.
somebody said, if you're on the difference between the left and the right is the right's looking for converts and the left's always looking for traitors.
Yeah,
and
and
you're
they're
an
both
unbeliever.
bad behaviours, aren't
Yeah,
they?
but you're an unbeliever, right?
Yeah.
So how do we
Yeah.
fix that?
Yeah. Wow.
The thing that sits throughout this book and all critical thinking
Yes.
is a thing called cognitive humility.
Mm.
You just have to be more humble about what you do know. Just don't be certain, right? And Voltaire said, doubt is an uncomfortable position, but certainty is a ridiculous one.
Yeah.
It's good, isn't it?
It's real good.
All right, while we're doing
You're full of great quotes.
No,
one more
you go.
thing I loved in here. Zombie stats.
Oh, yeah.
And I just love that.
Yeah.
There is in my line of work for the last
Yeah.
several years, there is a social return on investment statistic, $2.41, and I can quote the number because I see it everywhere.
And where does it come from?
It comes from a study, and I'd use the term kind of loosely, of sample size of like 6.
Oh my God. Right.
And it's just like, I mean, you know, like we can get into the, like from an academic perspective,
Yeah.
it's one study, it's a very small sample size,
Yeah.
it's got selection bias all over it.
Yeah.
And you kind of just, but
And
this
it just
idea of a
won't
zombie
go
stat that
away.
just keeps
It
going,
just won't
and
go
it's
away.
like,
I
it
know,
will not go away.
Well,
yeah.
Well, the
it's
example they
fascinating,
use in
isn't
the
it?
book, right? One of the examples, and this is great in terms of how do you talk back to a stat. You know, they talk about approximately 30% of shootings of the cops in America happen during traffic stops.
Oh.
Of the cops that get shot.
Yeah.
What that statistic's saying is of the cops that get shot, 30% happen at traffic stops.
Yeah.
So that sounds like a terrible statistic.
Yeah, it does.
But what they say is you have to swap the numerator and the denominator.
Mm.
The question isn't what percentage of cops get shot at traffic stops. The question is, of the percentage of traffic stops, how many cops get shot? And if you flip the statistic, it turns out that a cop gets shot 1 in every 361,000 traffic stops.
Yes,
So
right,
if you
I
flip
got you.
it,
So
right?
total number of traffic stops.
So instead of
Versus-
where do cops get shot?
Yep.
Right, where do cops get shot? A third of them get shot at traffic stops. How likely is a cop to get shot at a traffic stop? 1 in 360,000.
Wow.
Both statistics are true.
Yes,
They tell very different stories.
that's right.
Remember what
Yeah,
David Mack said? Every statistic has an agenda.
yeah that's.
I love that. I love that quote.
And so the key is, what is the agenda here? And well, it's and we talked about disinformation and misinformation. I think that's really important here. Is that not everything that we unpick is trying to be deceitful. Like
Yes.
so the intent
Yes.
behind
Yes.
this is not always malicious.
Yeah, but the point they're making, right, and that everyone's making around critical thinking is if we were all more literate, information literate, that's what Parisa was saying as well.
Yeah.
You know, we'll be able to navigate this much more effectively. Like universities, high schools do a very poor job of making people critical thinkers. Right? And
Because they're set up for tests, aren't they?
Exactly.
It's just like fact.
I have some
learn.
sympathy for that.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know, we're not graduating a generation of hardcore critical thinkers.
No, well, we haven't for a while, I would say, potentially. Yeah.
So there's 28 timely reminders that come out of the book, right?
Yeah.
I have it as a handout in my course.
Yes.
So I'll just give you some of them, right? Always be willing to change your mind in light of new evidence.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And we've talked about Rethinking by Adam Grant.
Exactly.
Great example.
And there's that
like,
quote that didn't come from Keynes, but everybody attributes to Keynes.
okay,
which is,
another one.
you know, when the facts change, I change my opinion.
Yes.
What do you do, sir?
Yeah.
know?
Do you know who said that?
Well, I think just someone made it up.
Yeah.
Always consider alternative explanations
Yes.
of the data.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
You know, and then uncertainty is not the same as ignorance.
And
Like,
uncertainty is a whole nother wormhole to go down, isn't it? Because even you mentioned the whole 1 in 360,000, traffic stop thing. It's very hard to comprehend, isn't
Very
it?
hard to comprehend.
And then you think about something like that, and you go, okay, how many? If a policeman's on a traffic job, or in the traffic role for the day, how many stops does he make per day?
Or she?
She? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry. No, definitely wasn't going down there. Thanks for that. Make me look real bad.
Sorry. We can edit that out.
The point is the whole, you need some stuff around things to make you go, hang on, let's put this in context.
But you've studied stats. I've studied stats. Numbers are funny.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Probability is really weird, right?
Yeah.
The great example is one of the ways that people who fake data in academic research often get found out is because their random number generation isn't random at all. It's stochastic. Like it has patterns that they think are random. But for instance, nobody faking data goes 1, 2, 3. But of course, you can easily randomly generate numbers that are 1, 2, 3 out of 20, right?
Yeah, 100%. I love their tips. So they've got question the source.
Yep.
Be aware of unfair comparison. I think that's a really good one, isn't it? Because it's like, if it seems to be good to be true,
it probably is.
Classic.
Good.
Now, I just gave you the think in orders of magnitude, and I think that's a really great one, isn't it? So when you're seeing a number, can you contextualize it in some way and kind of go, does this seem right? And I think I've already told you a great example of this is we had you talk about they don't teach critical thinking, but I have a very vivid memory, and I may have talked about this on the podcast before, but university lecturer who was taking us through a test and replaying some of our results. He, this is in the days of overhead projector.
Yeah.
So he was putting up people's answers from the test in front of the class the week after a test, just to make a point. Now, this is an engineering class, so we were sizing things.
Yeah.
And I remember one of them was, so do you think the reservoir has a diameter of 10,000 meters? And you could see someone kind of go, oh my God, that's my writing, and scurry into the. No, but this is this orders of magnitude thing, isn't it? And it's just like it's sense checking. It's kind of going, does that seem reasonable? Don't just roll through.
But you need. Does that seem reasonable? You do need that referent. Like one of the things we talk about all the time is the problem of the implicit referent. Like, if you say to somebody, let's say you're teaching a class and you say to somebody, how good's this class? Well, compared to what?
Yeah.
Like, what are they going to compare to? How good was the meal? Yeah. Like, how good was the meal you had last night? Well, compared to what? The best meal you've ever had? Or,
that's right.
So seriously, comparisons are really interesting. Which is why, again, in science, we have to be really, really clear about our terms.
What are we trying to find out?
So one of the questions we ask in our critical thinking course, right, and I'm giving it away if people ever give that course, so I just randomly throw in the question, what's the tallest mountain in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and they start throwing answers at me halfway through the course. And I'm like, I'm just so disappointed in all of you, right? Because the first thing you should ask me is, what do you mean by tallest?
Yeah.
Because it turns out there are at least 3 different interpretations, depending on how you think tallest. Everyone thinks Everest, but that's just above sea level, right? Not below sea level, and there are other ways to define it. But
do you know the answer to that question?
It depends. The answer is it depends. Depends on what you mean by tallest.
Right, good.
Like the 3 simple answers are, Everest is the tallest mountain in the world above sea level. Mauna Kea is the tallest mountain in the world from its base to its top.
Yes.
But if you mean what is the mountain that is closest, top of which mountain is closest to the moon, it's Mount Chimborazo, because the equator pokes out further into space than the poles.
Wow.
So you've got 3 different. So the one that's furthest from the center of the Earth to the top, that's a measure of tallest. That's Chimborazo.
Yeah.
And the point I make is, right, no one cares about mountains, but you care about loyalty and fidelity and excellence. Well, what the hell do you mean by that? And you get into this problem when you're reading data and you're reading policy or you're doing anything at work around semantic ambiguity. We use these words that everybody knows what they mean: satisfaction, excellence, whatever, hard work.
Yes.
But actually,
what does that mean? Yeah. That's great. That's great. So there's always, I think that's that questioning the intent thing, isn't it?
But so they talk about what's now known as Hitchens' razor, which is what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So if somebody's saying something and they don't have evidence, you can just chuck it out without evidence, right? Yeah. Also, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof.
That's cool.
You think about climate change, right? If the scientific consensus is climate change is real, that doesn't necessarily mean it's real, but you're going to need a pretty bloody good argument.
Yeah, so this argument around, and they do touch upon this, don't they? The medium, the message, all that kind of stuff, the clickbait stuff, and the argument around, like, take climate change as an example, the airtime given to data that it's real, and then the one person that's saying it's not, and when it's 50-50, and you give that impression, we want to give a balanced story, and I've heard that from the media, but that's not balanced,
exactly.
is it?
Go back to swap the numerator and the denominator.
That's right.
If 1 out of 400 scientists says no, and 399 say yes, it's not a balanced view.
Yeah.
You're not saying you shouldn't present the contrarian view, but you should frame it as an outlier. Like it might, this isn't about the majority's always right. The history of science shows that's not true.
That's 100%.
Yeah, but we have to be really clear about what we're claiming.
Yeah, fascinating.
Which is why this book's so good. We're using the tools in the book to frame.
We're smashing the tools in the book.
I mean, look,
in a conversation. That's good.
I think this is a great book. And the thing I was thinking about and couldn't say in the last episode is the Parisa book's great, but I think this book kind of subsumes that argument. So the Parisa book is about how the internet's...
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and we were thinking about this, weren't we, when we talked about doing these episodes, is like, what one should we do first? And I feel like this is the academic grunt behind the filter bubble to some extent.
Yeah, but let's be careful with the academic grunt. For those of you listening, I'm doing air quotes, because this is a grunty book. but it doesn't come across as being an academic.
No, that's right. That's a good point.
It's not a difficult book to read.
That's a good point.
It's an easy book to read.
Accessible
Yeah.
academia, which is like the gold standard of books.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
non-fiction books.
The public intellectual, right? You do
Yes.
get the sense that this is the sort of thing Adam Grant could have written, which is high praise.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm sure he's well aware of it.
Yeah.
But one last line. The chief source of bullshit you need to contend with is yourself.
Oh, yeah. So there's a great rule from Richard Feynman, one of my intellectual heroes, who says,
and I think that's probably from him.
The first law of science
Yes.
is that you must fool yourself, and realize you are the easiest person to fool. The person who's most likely to fall for your bullshit is
yourself. Yeah. So, and I'm shocked that we haven't said bullshit more times in this episode. That was my prediction here.
I know. Look, what can I tell you? This book, as I said at the beginning, it's the book that we use as a course book in our critical thinking course.
Yeah.
I love it. I think every bloody university graduate should read it.
Yes, absolutely. Right. So, shall we leave it there?
I think so. This is a great book.
Yes. This is not a bullshit book. I just need to say it one more time.
Well done.
Cheers.